I look at the world, I look at the night sky, and people often ask me if I believe there is a grand designer, a master architect who created all of this and pulls the strings of the cosmos. And I have to tell them the truth. I have to tell them how I actually see the universe. For some people, that truth is terrifying. We are sitting on this tiny, wandering rock, suspended in an ocean of nothingness so vast that light itself takes billions of years to cross it. And when you actually look at the machinery of nature, when you peel back the layers of physics and look at the atoms, you do not find a divine hand. You find probability. You find rules so beautiful and yet so incredibly indifferent to our existence. People want certainty. They want a neat little story with a creator at the center, because the alternative requires you to stand at the edge of the unknown and admit that we might just be a magnificent, complex accident. But I prefer the doubt. I prefer the mystery of not knowing over answers that cannot be questioned, because once you understand the actual laws governing the stars and the very fabric of space and time, the idea of a creator who intervenes in our daily lives starts to fall apart completely. It simply does not fit the data. If you are brave enough to let go of the comforting stories, if you want to look at how the universe actually works without relying on miracles, stick with me. Subscribe to this channel, join me on this journey, and let us look at the evidence together. Because what we find in the cold, hard equations of reality is far more magnificent than any myth ever told. Let me tell you how I look at the world. When I was a little boy, my father used to sit with me and read from the encyclopedia. We would look at pictures of dinosaurs or insects or the moon. He would explain things to me. But he did not just tell me facts. He taught me the most important lesson of my life. He taught me the difference between knowing the name of something and actually knowing the thing itself. You can know the name of a bird in all the languages of the world, but when you are finished, you will know absolutely nothing whatever about the bird. You will only know about humans in different places and what they call the bird. To understand the bird, you have to look at it. You have to watch what it does. You have to observe nature without prejudice. This is the exact same way I approach the biggest question of all, the question of God. I do not care what ancient books call him. I do not care what names philosophers give to the universe. I only care about what I can observe. Imagine that the universe is a great, complicated game of chess being played by the gods, and we are observers. We do not know what the rules of the game are. All we are allowed to do is watch the playing. Of course, if we watch long enough, we may eventually catch on to a few of the rules. The rules of the game are what we call fundamental physics. We watch the board. We notice that bishops only stay on one color. We figure out the rule for how the knights move. We realize that matter attracts other matter. We call that gravity. we figure out that light always travels at exactly the same speed in a vacuum, almost 300,000 kilometers per second. We realize that energy cannot be created from nothing, and it cannot be destroyed into nothing. It just moves around, changing forms. For thousands of years, our ancestors watched the board, but they only saw magic. When the earth shook, they thought a giant was angry. When sickness spread, they thought it was a punishment from the heavens. God was the explanation for everything we did not understand. God was in the gaps of our knowledge, but slowly, painfully, we started to figure out the rules of the chess game. We learned about tectonic plates shifting under the crust of the earth. We discovered microscopic bacteria and viruses. We realized that lightning is not a weapon thrown from the clouds, but a massive discharge of static electricity seeking the path of least resistance. And as our understanding grew, the gaps where God used to live started getting smaller and smaller. Every time we figured out a rule, we realized that the universe runs on its own logic. It does not need a divine hand to push the pieces around. The rules are complete. They are unbreakable. People ask me, what about miracles? A miracle is supposed to be a moment when God steps in and breaks the rules of the game to help someone or to send a message. But let me tell you what that actually means. To break a law of physics is not a small thing. If you suspend gravity, even for a moment in a local area, or if you create matter out of absolutely nothing to feed a crowd of people, you shatter the entire framework of reality. The equations of the universe balance perfectly. If you cheat on one side of the equation, the whole system collapses. In all our years of observing the stars, the atoms, the radiation from the birth of the cosmos, we have never, not once, seen the rules broken. The universe is terrifyingly strict. So, if God cannot break the rules without destroying the fabric of reality, what is left for him to do? Some people tell me that God is simply the rule maker. He set up the chessboard, painted the squares, carved the pieces, walked away to let the game play out. That is a very elegant idea. It lets you keep your science and your religion. But there is a massive problem with it. If a grand designer built this universe, you would expect the foundation of it to make perfect, logical, organized sense. But when we look deep down, when we pull out our microscopes and look at the very bottom of reality, we do not find a beautifully ordered machine. We find something else entirely. We find a world that behaves so strangely, so unpredictably, that it shatters the very idea of a master plan. Let me tell you what happens when we look into the quantum world. We like to think of the universe as a giant, beautiful clock. You wind it up, the gears catch, the cogs turn, the hands move in a perfectly predictable circle. For hundreds of years, this was the dream of classical physics. We believed that if you knew where every gear was and how fast it was spinning, you could predict the future perfectly. This idea is incredibly comforting to people who want to believe in a grand designer. If the universe is a perfect clock, it is very easy to imagine a clockmaker, a divine being who wound up the spring at the beginning of time, set the initial conditions, knew exactly how every single second of eternity would play out. But in the 1920s, we started looking closer. We did not just look at the gears of the clock. We looked at the metal they were made of. We looked at the atoms. We looked at the tiny electrons zipping around the nucleus. And the clockmaker idea fell to pieces right in our hands. Because nature, at her most fundamental microscopic scale, does not work like a clock at all. She works like a casino. Let me explain what I mean, because this is very important. In our normal, everyday world, if I throw a baseball to you, it has a definite physical path. It leaves my hand, it pushes through the air, and it lands in your glove. If you know exactly how hard I threw it, the weight of the ball, and the direction of the wind, you can calculate precisely where it will land. The outcome is certain, it is determined, but if I take a single electron and shoot it at a screen, I cannot tell you where it will land. Nobody can. The most brilliant physicists in the world cannot tell you. It is not because our instruments are broken, or because we are not smart enough to figure it out. It is because nature herself does not know. When you shoot an electron, it does not travel in a single solid, predictable line like a baseball. It travels as a wave of possibilities. It could go left, it could go right, it could go straight up. Only picks a final location at the exact fraction of a second that it crashes into the screen. We can calculate the odds of where it might end up. We can say there is a 70% chance it will land near the center and a 30% chance it will hit the edge. But we can never, ever know for sure. The core foundation of reality is built on pure, unadulterated chance. Now, I want you to really think about what this means for the idea of an all-knowing creator. The traditional concept of God is that he knows everything, the past, the present, the future. He has a master plan for the cosmos. But quantum mechanics tells us undeniably that the future is strictly unpredictable. It is not just hidden from human eyes. It is hidden from the universe itself. If an electron has no predetermined path, then a grand, perfect, inevitable plan cannot exist. All-knowing architect cannot know the outcome of the cosmic dice roll because the outcome does not actually exist until the dice stop rolling. The solid world you see around you right now, your hands, the chair you are sitting on, the walls of your room, all of it is made of trillions and trillions of these unpredictable little ghosts. The only reason a baseball acts like a baseball, the moon stays in its orbit, is because you are averaging out the chaotic probabilities of countless atoms. The absolute certainty of our everyday life is just a statistical illusion. So, if the basement of reality is pure chance, there is no master script guiding every particle. Nature is making it up as she goes along. But this brings up a terrifying problem. If nothing is predetermined and everything exists only as a fuzzy haze of probability, how does anything become real? How do we go from an ocean of invisible possibilities to the solid physical universe we live in? What actually forces the dice to stop rolling? That is where things get truly weird, and where we hit a paradox that has kept me awake for many, many nights. I told you that an electron exists as a wave of possibilities until it is measured. But how does that actually work? How does the universe know when it is being forced to make a choice? To understand this, I have to walk you through an experiment that contains the entire mystery of quantum mechanics. It is a paradox so mind-boggling, it forces us to question what reality even means. We call it the double-slit experiment. Imagine I have a machine gun. I am shooting bullets at a thick steel plate. In the middle of this plate, there are two narrow vertical gaps, side by side. Behind this steel plate is a wooden wall. If I fire the gun randomly at the steel plate, most bullets bounce off. But some pass through the left gap, some pass through the right gap. When we look at the wooden wall in the back, we see two separate vertical bands of bullet holes. That makes perfect sense. Bullets are solid objects. Now, imagine we put that same steel plate in a pool of water. We push the water to create waves. The wave hits the plate and passes through both gaps at the same time. On the other side, the water spreads out from both gaps. The ripples crash into each other. They create a beautiful, complex pattern on the back wall. A pattern of many intersecting ripples. This also makes sense. Waves behave like waves. Now we take our electrons, tiny, microscopic chunks of matter. We shoot them one by one through the two gaps. Because they are individual pieces of matter, we expect them to act like our bullets. We expect to see two stripes on the back wall, but we do not. When we fire single electrons, one at a time, they somehow build up the exact same intersecting ripple pattern that the water made. Think about how incredibly impossible that is. We are firing them single file. One electron goes in. It has absolutely nothing to bump into. How can a single solid piece of matter create a wave pattern? It means that a single electron is going through both gaps at the exact same time. It is interfering with itself. It is a wave of pure probability, flowing through both paths simultaneously. We scientists are stubborn. We do not like magic, and we do not like ghosts. So we decided to outsmart the electron. We put a tiny detector right next to the gaps to spy on the electron. We wanted to catch it in the act and record exactly which gap it goes through. We set up the detector. We fire the single electron, and our detector clicks. It tells us the electron went through the left gap. But when we look at the back wall, the wave pattern is gone. Because we looked at it, the electron suddenly stopped, acting like a wave. It acted exactly like a solid bullet again, leaving just two simple stripes on the wall. The mere act of measuring nature changed the way nature behaves. When we do not look, the electron is a wave of infinite possibility. The moment we demand an answer, the wave collapses. The universe is forced to pick a single reality. People look at this paradox, and they jump to wild conclusions. Mystics and religious thinkers love this experiment. They say, look, the universe requires an observer to exist. They claim that reality needs a conscious mind to look at it, and therefore a supreme cosmic consciousness, God, must be the ultimate observer, keeping the entire universe real. But they are completely misunderstanding the physics. The universe does not care if you have a brain, or a soul, or consciousness. The detector we used to spy on the electron was just a dumb piece of machinery. It has no mind. It has no awareness. The collapse of the wave has absolutely nothing to do with human consciousness or divine observation. It has to do with physical interaction. To look at an electron, the detector has to bounce a tiny particle of light off it. That physical collision, tiny exchange of energy, is what forces the electron out of its wave state and locks it into a single path. The universe is not waiting for a God to observe it. The universe is a massive blind web of physical interactions. Every atom is constantly bumping into every other atom, forcing reality to lock into place, second by second, entirely on its own. But if there is no grand observer, and everything is just a blind mechanical web, we arrive at a conclusion that will absolutely break your brain. I want you to take everything you think you know about space, about distance, and about how things connect to each other, completely throw it out the window. If the collapse of the quantum wave did not make you question reality, what I am about to tell you will absolutely break your brain. It is a concept so unsettling that Albert Einstein himself hated it. He refused to believe it could be true. He called it spooky action at a distance. But we have tested it over and over again. And the universe does not care if we find it spooky. It is the truth. To understand why this is so terrifying for the idea of a grand designer, we first have to agree on a basic, unbreakable fact of nature. Nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Light moves at almost 300,000 kilometers per second. That is the absolute speed limit of the cosmos. If the sun were to magically vanish right this exact second, we would not know about it for 8 minutes. Earth would keep orbiting an empty space for 8 full minutes, because the gravitational change cannot reach us any faster than light. Space separates us. Distance is real. In order for one thing to affect another, a signal must travel across the empty space between them. Now, I am going to break that fact. In the quantum world, we can take 2 particles, let us say 2 electrons, and bring them very close together so their wave probabilities interact. They become tangled up. Then, we take these 2 entangled particles and we separate them. We keep one here in my laboratory on Earth. we send the other one all the way to the surface of the moon. Because they are quantum particles, neither of them has a definite state yet. Imagine they are spinning, but nature has not decided which way. They are a fuzzy haze of possibility. It is only when we measure one that it is forced to pick a direction. Here is the brain-breaking part. If I look at my electron here on Earth, the universe forces it to choose a state. Let us say it starts spinning upward. At that exact identical fraction of a millisecond, the electron on the moon will instantly lock into a downward spin. There is zero delay. It happens fast and light. It happens instantaneously. How did the electron on the moon know what my electron on Earth was doing? No signal could possibly travel that fast. There is no secret radio wire connecting them. There is no hidden gear turning between the Earth and the moon. Yet, somehow, measuring one particle instantly determines the reality of another particle hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. Think about the profound philosophical horror of what that means. It means that deep down, at the most fundamental level of reality, space is an illusion. Distance does not actually exist. Those two electrons are not two separate things communicating across a vast void. They are a single, undivided system. The universe is not a massive box filled with disconnected objects. It is a seamless, indivisible fabric where everything is intimately woven together without the need for space or time to pass messages. Now, bring the idea of God back into this picture. When humans invented gods, they modeled them after human builders. A carpenter takes separate pieces of wood and nails them together across a physical distance. We imagine God as the ultimate mechanic sitting outside of space, reaching his hands in and manipulating separate pieces of matter to build the stars and the planets. But quantum entanglement proves that the universe has no separate pieces. There is no outside. There is no distance. The concept of a creator sitting apart from his creation, moving distinct objects around like toys, completely falls apart because the objects are not actually distinct. The universe is not a machine that was built. It is a single, bizarre, non-local event that is constantly unfolding. If reality is an indivisible web that instantaneously balances itself without signals, without time, without separation, then the idea of a localized thinking mind managing the whole thing is not just unlikely. It is a completely obsolete, primitive way of trying to understand a cosmos that is far weirder and far more connected than any ancient scripture could ever possibly imagine. And that brings us to the hardest truth of all. We have seen that the universe is not a predictable clock, and it has no separate, disconnected pieces. So, if there is no grand architect turning the gears, and no divine script telling the actors what to do, why does anything happen at all? Why does a seed grow into a tree? Why do stars ignite? If the universe is a blind game of chance, why is there a clear direction to our lives? To answer this, we have to face the hardest truth in all of physics. We have to talk about time, and we have to talk about how everything, everywhere, is eventually falling apart. In the deep mathematical equations of physics, almost every rule works exactly the same forwards and backwards. If I show you a microscopic video of two atoms bouncing off each other, and I play it in reverse, you would not be able to tell the difference. The level of single particles, time does not seem to have an arrow. But in our everyday human world, time is a strict one-way street. If you accidentally push a glass coffee cup off a table, it shatters into 100 pieces on the floor. If you play that event in reverse, it looks like absolute magic. You will never, in a trillion years of waiting, see 100 shattered pieces of glass suddenly jump off the floor and assemble themselves into a perfect cup. Why not? We call this the second law of thermodynamics. It is perhaps the most unbreakable rule in existence. It simply means that